Hello, everyone. Chris Atchison here from the Southwest Florida RE Group, powered by MVP Realty. It's great to have all of you back on social media, and thanks for tuning in again today. This is the second installment of my episode of my series entitled Tips and Tricks to Buying in Southwest Florida. Last week, I spoke about attorneys. I spoke about tax savings. I spoke about loan types. Hurricane glass, and a couple other various important factors, especially for some of my out-of-state buyers up there that kind of have some different norms and laws in regards to their real estate transactions and processes. This week, I'm going to be talking about seller disclosures and material defects and disclosing those material defects and the laws behind those things. Then I'm going to be talking about the norms of earnest money deposits, okay, also called good faith deposits in some states. And then I'm going to be talking about contractual dates. Contractual dates can have different meanings in different states, believe it or not. So let's just jump right into it. So sellers disclosures, okay? So the state of Florida requires sellers to disclose any facts or conditions about the property that are going to have, quote, a substantial impact on the value of the property and other factors that are not easily observable, unquote. What might this be, right? So we're talking mold, we're talking water damage, roof leaks, cracks in the windows, termites, radon, Chinese drywall, broken appliances, cloth wiring, lead paint, right? The list goes on and on. Any defects that have a substantial material impact on the value of the home. Now, here's the real kicker though, right? The seller is not required in the state of Florida to fill out a seller's disclosure. Interesting, right? So by law, they have to disclose any material defects that have a substantial impact on the value of the home, but by law, they are not required to fill out a seller's disclosure. Kind of a paradox, isn't it? So we could get into a very lengthy legal discussion about all this. And my disclaimer again is I'm not a real estate attorney, but I'll just say this: get an inspector with a good reputation and a lot of experience that top realtors in the area use, and use that inspector. And don't go for the one with the fanciest looking website and maybe the lowest price, right? You want to pay good money to get a solid inspection. Some of these inspection companies come in and they do a 15-minute inspection and charge you $200. And they're not going to find everything wrong with the house. There's no way, right? So get a good inspector, trust your inspector, trust your realtor and your realtor's inspector, and go off of what they say. Do not go off of what the seller says. And even if they fill out the seller's disclosure, which they typically do, maybe 90% of the time, I wouldn't trust that either, because I've seen that filled out incorrectly. Okay. Now on to the second topic, earnest money deposits in Southwest Florida. So earnest money deposits, what are they, right? They're also called good faith deposits. They can just be called deposits. There can be an initial deposit only. There can be an initial deposit and a second deposit, or I've also heard of 3 levels of deposits. Now, that's never happened to me in Southwest Florida. I've done 2 deposits before. Most of the time, I only do a single deposit though, okay? And that is to show the seller that you're serious about buying their home and you want to go under contract and you want them to take their home off the market and market as a pending contract, right? Or a pending deal, right? So typically the range in terms of how much money you're going to put down for a earnest money deposit for a loan purchase is going to be between 1% and 3%. These are very rough figures, right? Now on a cash purchase, it's going to be 5, 6, 10%, maybe more, right? And there's a lot of factors that really play into this whole equation. It all depends on the exact location of the home, the price range of the home, the type of community it's in. It can depend on what kind of listing agent you're working with, right? Are they an older, kind of old school listing agent from Marco Island, or are they a younger North Naples new construction oriented type of listing agent that you know, is kind of up with the latest and greatest of neighbor and some of the various, you know, uh, local realtor boards. It all depends, right? So if your realtor knows what they're doing with the contracts and contingencies, though, and the dates, you should have zero risk about in losing your earnest money deposit. Okay, there should be zero risk again in losing your earnest money deposit. How do you get to a point where you feel super comfortable putting that money down? You have to trust your lender, right? If the lender doesn't come through, you could lose your deposit. They need to know early on that you're going to qualify for that loan. You have to trust your realtor and make sure your realtor knows the mortgage contingency date, the inspection end date, the you know, the escrow date, the closing date, the appraisal contingency date, right? There's a lot of dates in here, and we'll get to those later. But you should put a hefty earnest money deposit up front, in my opinion, on an as-is contract. That's typically what I do, because I feel that there's no risk, and I feel that that deposit puts a sense of seriousness in the seller's perception of you. They feel that you're coming as a serious buyer, and that they, you know, they're not going to take other offers. They're not as likely to take other offers because you're coming with a serious deposit. Okay. And there should be zero risk of losing that money anyway, because it goes towards the down payment. And if you do an as-is contract, you'll be able to back out by, you know, day 10 or day 15. And if you have questions about what I'm talking about, feel free to comment or reach out to me directly after that. I went down a little bit of a tangent there, but anyways, I digress. So the third thing that I'm going to talk about is contract dates, including closing dates in Florida real estate. Okay. I've heard from several of my out-of-state buyers that closing dates, for example, in many northern states are, how can I say it, more lenient or loosely defined, and can be pushed around, easily manipulated without much hassle from either side. They're often in some states just kind of like a general estimated close date. And it's the same is true for small towns. Their inspection dates, their mortgage contingency dates, their permitting dates, their lease sharing dates, their appraisal contingency dates, their loan application dates. All of these dates in the contracts, which all have different definitions and different meanings, are very loosely defined, especially in smaller towns and a lot of northern states like New York. Okay. Now I can tell you from years of personal experience that in Southwest Florida, the dates are very, very serious. Okay. If you push back a closing date, for example, the seller has the right to terminate the contract. Okay. That might come as a shock to some people. If you want to extend the inspection period for one day, you need both sides to sign. You can't just extend it and hope that they're going to be okay with it and just, you know, figure it out later. It's a very, very regimented and strict process in terms of the contractual dates, you know, everything from the earnest money deposit date to the closing date. So, you know, that's really kind of an interesting thing for a lot of my out-of-state buyers, right? Other thing is addendums are very common in Florida real estate transactions, and they are often written by realtors, okay? Addendums are just things that, you know, new negotiations, new agreements that come up as the contract, you know, progresses, right? It can happen usually later on in the inspection period. Maybe if you want to extend the mortgage contingency date, you might do that as well. But they are written, these addendums are mostly written by realtors, okay? The disclaimer is realtors are not supposed to write or practice law ever. They are not attorneys, but the paradox is most realtors write a lot of addendums, and a lot of these addendums can get complicated, right? So the dates are critical in Florida real estate, and you should make sure that you have a real estate agent that is very in tune with these dates. They know the meaning of all these dates. Make sure that lender is in tune with these dates. You know, for me, for example, I have 3 transaction coordinators that I work with to make sure that every transaction is progressing as it should be, and we are hitting our milestones and our timelines accordingly. And that's how I prefer to work. You know, I'll pay those transaction coordinators to make sure that my deals are are going smoothly, and to mitigate risk to my clients and myself. So that's today's or this week's tips and tricks to buying in Southwest Florida. Stay tuned to next week. I'll be talking about some other concerns that I've heard from my northern buyer friends, out of state buyers, everything from alligators to community district developments and various tax districts to you know um, travel to snowbirds to basically everything. So stay tuned next week. It was good seeing you guys, and have a great week.